The Ghosts of the Granite Wall. The CPRR track, in early 1864, had crawled barely 30 miles from Sacramento. The real challenge began in the foothills, where the granite began to rear up. It was here, at the foot of the Great Wall, the Chinese nickname for the massive, impassable cliffs of the Sierra, that Ah Ling first found himself. Ah Ling was not a man of great stature or muscle. He was slight, nimble, and possessed the wiry strength of a lifetime spent in the paddy fields near Gongju. He had left his home and his family with a single overriding purpose: to earn enough Gold Mountain money, Gam San, as California was called, to one day return and elevate his family out of crushing poverty. Like thousands of his countrymen, he had traveled across the vast, terrifying Pacific in the foul hold of a crowded junk, only to find the Gold Mountain not a land of easy riches, but a crucible of hard labor and bitter hatred. Now he stood on a precarious timber scaffolding hundreds of feet above the valley floor, his leather apron stiff with sweat and dust. His job? A driller on the famed Cape Horn stretch. Cape Horn was a near-vertical granite headland where the CP line had to turn a sharp bend. Crocker's engineers, out of time and patience, had decided on a method of work that defied all safety, suspending men from ropes to drill and blast. The air was thick with the stench of black powder and the metallic tang of rock dust. Ah Ling and his work partner, a stoic man named Wang from a neighboring district, were tied into baskets woven from rope and leather. They were lowered down the sheer face of the cliff, dangling like spiders over a dizzying drop. "The rock is too hard today, Ah Ling," Wang muttered in their native Tai-San dialect, his face pale beneath the grime. The granite here was unforgiving, far denser than the slate and sandstone the Irish crews had struggled with. A single hand drill and hammer blow might only chip away a quarter-inch of rock. "Keep steady, Wang. We must make the hole deep enough," Ah Ling replied, his voice calm despite the rope creaking overhead. He knew the cost of a shallow hole: a poor blast, a delay in the work, and the inevitable savage impatience of the white foremen. The drilling was a brutal rhythmic ballet. One man held the iron drill, a solid steel rod with a finely tempered chisel-like tip, against the rock face. The second man, the hammerman, swung a heavy 7-pound sledgehammer, striking the end of the drill with precise, bone-jarring blows. The drill had to be constantly rotated by the holder between strikes, a quarter turn each time, to prevent it from binding and to ensure a clean, round hole. The rhythm was crucial. Tap, tap, crack, rotate. Tap, tap, crack, rotate. They worked for hours, the sun beating down, the noise deafening. The goal was to drill a series of holes, 3, 4, sometimes 5 feet deep, into which the deadly black powder charges would be placed. Finally, the foreman's signal horn blew, the sign for blasting. This was the terrifying climax. The white powder man, usually a skilled and heavily paid Irishman, would hastily pack the holes with black powder, a fuse, and a clay stopper. The order would be given, "Fire in the hall!" Ah Ling and Wang would be hauled up, scrambling desperately against the rope and the face of the cliff, trying to gain enough vertical distance to escape the blast. But at Cape Horn, the cliff overhung, creating a massive stone anvil. There was nowhere to run. The roar of the explosion was not a sound, but a physical trauma. The concussion wave hit their dangling bodies like a giant's fist, knocking the breath from their lungs. Then came the deadly rain,
a torrent of pulverized rock, stone shrapnel, and unburned powder grains that pelted their exposed skin. On one particularly unforgiving section, a foreman, a man known only as the Beast for his relentless cruelty, ordered the charges set before Ah Ling and his crew had fully cleared the area. A massive chunk of granite, the size of a wagon wheel, was torn from the cliff. It plummeted down, scraping the basket of a nearby crew. 3 men, newly arrived, were crushed instantly, their bodies disappearing into the pine forest below, hundreds of feet down. The work did not stop. The rope was lowered, the debris was cleared, another crew, faces blank with fear, took the dead men's place. There was no funeral, no mourning period, no pause. The Central Pacific lost less time clearing the bodies than they did clearing the rock. This was the reality that Crocker had unleashed. The Big Four had initially doubted the Chinese. Now they were witnessing an endurance they couldn't comprehend. The Chinese workers, unlike the individualistic, demanding Irish, worked in organized, self-sufficient crews. They followed a structure inherited from their tongs and villages, providing their own provisions: rice, dried cuttlefish, vegetables, and tea, always boiled for sanitation, a practice that drastically reduced the illness that plagued the white camps. They were driven not by the American dream of land and liberty, but by the ancient, powerful, and utterly singular mandate of filial piety, to honor and provide for the family waiting across the sea. Ah Ling, standing on the newly carved narrow shelf of track bed, looked out at the vast, uncaring wilderness of the Sierra. He had survived the drilling and the blast. He had seen his comrades fall. He knew he was building an iron road for a country that saw him less than human. But with every blow of his hammer, he was inching closer to the money, the boat, and the redemption of his name. This was a long, silent, and deadly transaction. And this was only the beginning of the horror.